You're listening to the Plain Talking UK podcast, the UK-based podcast written by a passenger for anyone. And here are your hosts, Carla Stebbings, Matt Smith and Neville Bounds.
Well, hello and good morning and welcome to episode number 175 of the Plain Talking UK podcast. I'm Carl Stebbings. Joining me here at the Old Buckenham Airshow in Norfolk is my co-host Matt Smith. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. This is a very special show, isn't it? I'm a little bit hot, by the way. Can you bring me down a bit, please?
Oh, you're a bit hot, are you?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. But enough about me.
There we go. So you join us then here on Sunday morning. It's 11, just gone 11 o'clock here in the morning at the studio here, live on location at the Old Buckenham Airshow. Aircraft taxiing in right in front of us here at the moment. There we go. Everyone can still hear me, so don't panic. So thanks to everyone for joining us here in the YouTube chat room. There we go, engine shut down. We're all right now. It's been a bit of a cold start this morning, a bit windy, but the sun's out now. The clouds are starting to clear, and we're looking forward to a great airshow day. So, Matt, you were here yesterday with Owen.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, myself and Owen were here yesterday. We were representing, I believe is the correct phrase. And Owen took some great footage, which we'll play out for you a little bit later on, because actually the airshow doesn't start until we've finished broadcasting. So, but we recorded some footage yesterday that we'll try and play out to you. One of the most amazing things actually was a model aeroplane. Or a model aeroplane and its real counterpart, and they were doing a little display which was I've never seen anything like it. It was absolutely brilliant. But what is this little plane next to us? Do we know what it is? Because it is fascinating.
It's I forget the name of it. EZ. I forget the name of it now.
There are some great pleasure flights going
on.
I was talking with a friend of mine earlier. I'm not sure. Is it pleasure flight or is it flight experience? Because there's this debate about which one you're supposed to be calling
I would like to call it being a flight experience.
A flight experience, yeah. Well,
is
you
what
would
I'd call it. But
yeah, Jeff Braithwaite is suggesting maybe it's a glass air, possibly. No, okay. Oh, it's gone quiet.
It's gone quiet.
It's gone quiet. We can stop shouting.
Everyone can actually hear us now. Should we have some ATC broadcast?
Yeah, go on then. Yeah,
we'll turn up a little bit
so
you can hear.
Yeah, not too loud. It's not on number 3.
No. Oh, isn't it? No, it's
no.
not. It's on number 4. There we go. That's better.
We go. Yeah, not too loud.
Not too loud.
Anyway, so this is episode 175. We're going to do a normal show as per usual. So, it is Sunday the 30th of July. It is just gone 10 past 9. 10 past 11 in the morning. And, welcome to the Plain Talking UK podcast.
So we've got loads of people joining us in the chat room from around the world this morning, and we've got David M is in there. We've got Jeff Braithwaite, Tony S, Barbara Parish, Neville Bounds, who is not with us this week, unfortunately. He's live.
He's in the chat room though.
He's in the chat room. He's live on location somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've got David M. Owen's in the chat room. Dan Hannington, our photographer, is in the chat room. Dan, and we've got loads of people watching us via YouTube, which is really awesome.
Indeed.
Well, I suppose we ought to do a show of some description
come on, let's
today.
Do it, shall we?
Even
yes.
though
we are going to get. I should warn you, this is going to be one of those shows where we're very distracted by what's going on. So
So we're going to start the show then, as we do each week, with our rundown of the weekly news from around the world and the UK. So if you're ready, Matt.
Yes, I certainly am.
Let's go. So, kicking off this week's first news story then here, it's on the Guardian.com website, and the headline, Incredible Shrinking Airline Seat. US court says seat size a safety issue. So, this is all about the size of passenger seats shrinking on commercial airliners. It's a problem, but, unless you're the size of a house, I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem. But the US Appeals Court panel has said that the federal officials must reconsider their decision not to regulate the size of airline seats as a safety issue. In a ruling on Friday this week, one of the judges called it the case of the incredible shrinking airline seat. The Flyers' Rights passenger group called the Federal Aviation Administration in court after the agency rejected its request to write rules governing seat size and the distance between rows of seats. A 3-judge panel for the Federal Appeals Court in Washington said the FAA had relied on outdated or irrelevant issues and test studies before deciding that seat spacing was a matter of comfort, not safety. The judges sent the issue back to the FAA and said that the agency must come up with a better reasoned response to the group's safety concerns. The passenger group say small seats bunched too close together slow down emergency evacuations and raise the danger of travellers developing vein clots. A bit worrying there. So airlines have steadily reduced the space between rows to squeeze in extra seats and make more money. On discount carrier Spirit Airlines, a distance between the headrests of one seat that's on the seat in front of a distance called pitch is 28 inches or 71 centimetres, which after accounting for the seat itself leaves little legroom for the average passenger. This year, news leaked that American Airlines plan to order new Boeing 737 jets with just 29 inches or 74 centimetres of seat pitch in the last 3 rows to make room for an extra row of premium price seats at the front of the plane. American Airlines Chief Executive Doug Parker said on Friday that after objections from customers and flight attendants, the airline backed off. These rows will have 30 inches or 76 centimetres of pitch, which is still higher fit, or still a tighter fit than the airline's current planes. Flyers Right said the average seat has become a narrower too, shrinking from 18.5 inches to 17 inches. The group got the judge's attention. So, shrinking width of seats, Matt. Obviously, I mean, you've flown with Ryanair. I take it you were comfortable enough on board that 737-800.
Yeah. It's I suppose, and I don't mean this because I'm a bigger guy. One of the things that does concern me is it's not so much the seat pitch, but they are definitely getting narrower. When you think in the whole, everybody's getting bigger. I don't know if making the seats any smaller is a good idea. It might be a clever way of them trying to encourage you to buy sort of 2 seats, if you see what I mean. But we'll have to see. Really, I don't know if that's. If it's going to cause a problem later on, I don't know. I mean, you're quite lucky being of normal size, I suppose. So it's not
normal size.
Well, less of an issue for you, essentially. I've got to a point now where I'm so large. I've got like my own orbit that goes round me.
Okay.
Indeed. Anyway, on to the next story.
On to the next story.
2, yes,
especially one for you. This
absolutely.
This is not a horrible story at all.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's from the Sun newspaper, which is never a good start, and the headline is "Mile High Salary." No wonder Ryanair makes us pay to choose seats. Airline boss Michael O'Leary's pay rises to 8k a day. Pay rises. Right, stop it. Ryanair passengers have been infuriated by the airline in recent months, claiming that they are being forced to pay for allocated seats or face being seated at opposite ends of the cabin. The news that Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary's salary has risen yet again, is unlikely to calm anyone's temper either. A bit of quality journalism here by the Sun newspaper. The chief exec's earnings hit €3.26 million. That's £2.92 million last year, which works out at around about €8,931 or £7,987 a day, an annual increase of £89,000 on the salary he received the previous year. That's a 125 times the average salary of a nurse in the UK and 19.5 times the salary of the Prime Minister Theresa May. According to Ryanair's 2017 annual report, O'Leary was paid a salary of €1 million plus bonuses and share compensation. Now, I'm going to stop reading this story actually because it's really annoying me, to be brutally honest with you. I mean, he's CEO of a very successful company, so surely what he decides to pay himself is absolutely no one else's business whatsoever.
£8,000 a day.
Yeah, but it's
£8,000 a day.
Yeah, but it's his company. He could do with the money what he likes.
Oh, dear, but £8,000 a day. Can you imagine being on 8,000? If he does an 8-hour day, that's £1,000 an hour.
And I completely agree with the fact that obviously in comparison to poor, humble like nurses and doctors and all that kind of thing, it's appalling pay. And if he was a public servant, then it would be a different kettle of fish altogether. But it's absolutely none of our business what he gets paid, is it? It's his own business.
It's nice to know.
No, it's not. It's none of our business.
He could technically go and buy a really nice car every 2 days.
Yeah, and if he's the boss of Ryanair, he should be.
Or a reasonably priced car every day.
Yes, a reason. No, I'm sorry. It's none of our business what they do. It's like this. I mean, the whole BBC scandal that I mentioned carefully, because we do have someone from the BBC on later. But the whole thing about the BBC thing, I can understand why some people are up in arms about that, because obviously it's public money that's paying those salaries. But Michael O'Leary is not responsible to the government, as long as he pays his taxes.
Does he?
Well, I'm sure he does somewhere along the line. I'm sure there's some taxes paid there somewhere.
Actually, Neville Bounds in the chat room said that he's currently on £8 a day.
Wow, as much as that? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, Nev, you're worth absolutely every single penny.
He is. Yeah. He is, definitely. So moving on to the next story. This one is on the manxradio.com site. And the headline... Good news for UK travellers on low-cost airline Flybe, because they've been named the most punctual airline. So Flybe has been named Britain's most punctual airline. Figures commissioned by the BBC show the carrier, which serves a number of routes and to and from the island, has consistent record of departing and arriving on time at all its operational airports. According to an industry analysis, OAG, just over 1 in 10 Flybe flights are significantly delayed. Conversely, EasyJet, which also carries Manx passengers to Liverpool and London, has one of the worst track records for delays. Ronaldsway Airport is given just 1 out of a possible 5-star rating by OAG, with just over 75% of its flights operating on time. So that's good news for Flybe. They fly the Dash 8 Q400 here in the UK, which is incredibly noisy aircraft, I will say. But no, it's good news for Flybe, because they fly from our regional airport here.
They do, Norwich,
which is just across that way, not very far away from us here now at Old Buckenham. We're not far from their airspace here, no, so good news for Flybe.
Yeah, actually, must be a bit of a nightmare when you're doing a show like this and you are so close to Norwich Airport. Certainly as far as the as the crow flies and you haven't got to go by road. Oh yeah,
there's certainly some NOTAMs in place, I'd imagine, in the area for us here. But yes, it's an interesting one there. So moving on to the next story, which is for you, Matt.
Yeah, this is on thefool.com, which makes me a little bit nervous. Are you sure this is actually a real website, or am I about to read out some
Actually, this story, Matt, is for anyone who's ever wondered just what the average prices are for commercial aircraft.
Okay. So this is the Motley Fool website, as I say, which makes me a bit nervous. Are we sure it's a real website? I'm sure it is. Here are the average prices for Boeing's 5 major commercial airlines.
Wow.
So Boeing is well known for its hugely popular 737, as well as its 747, first introduced in 1970, and its 787 Dreamliner. But there's also a new 400-seat aircraft, the 777X. That's still on the drawing board and is predicted to become the biggest selling aeroplane in the market after its first delivery in 2020. Investors cheer when Boeing beats out rival Airbus for lucrative contracts, as it generates more revenue and higher profits. At the Paris Airshow just last month, Boeing crushed Airbus by announcing commitments for 437 new aeroplanes compared to only 182 for its rival. The biggest seller was the 737 MAX family of aircraft, which scored 418 commitments from buyers, mostly for the 737 MAX 10, though Boeing also received 125 commitments for the 737 MAX. 737 MAX 8. The rest of the commitments were for the 787 Dreamliner. Notably absent were orders for the iconic 747, which underscores why Boeing is phasing out the aircraft. So the 747, that's actually a 4-engine. Is that one of the reasons why they're sort of phasing it out?
Well, we ran a story last week, didn't we, saying that the airlines are steadily phasing out the 747s.
I knew that's why it was fresh in my memory.
Yes, it should be, hopefully.
It's the latest current market outlook, which forecasts industry demand out to 2036. Boeing eliminated a separate call-out for very large aircraft that previously contained the 747, choosing instead to merge it into a combined medium/large passenger wide-body category. Boeing says that the planes aren't selling. Airbus says likewise in relation to its A380 airplane, which is a real shame because I think the A380 is a beautiful aircraft actually, because few carriers have the capabilities and routes to handle the planes with more than 400 seats. The 747 is a 400-seat aircraft, but can be configured to cram in as many as 660 passengers onto a single plane. In fact, Boeing only has 23 747s in its backlog of airplanes, the fewest of any aircraft, and it produces just one plane every 2 months. Obviously, it's not committing many resources to it. It's a bit
so
of
the prices. We've got the list of prices here for the Boeing family, and coming in at the most expensive is obviously the 747. This is the Dash 8. There's a backlog of currently, according to this, there's a backlog of currently 23 of these aircraft, and they're producing a production rate is 0.5 a month. They're producing half an aircraft a month.
Wow.
The current price, average price.
You mean half finished?
Half finished,
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
The average price of 747 then is $387.2 million.
Wow, very cool. Very
Coming
cool.
in after that, you've got the 777. There's a backlog of 124 of these. Boeing are planning to increase to 5 aircraft produced a month in August this year. You can get one of those, $344.2 million. Coming in after that, you've got the 787 Dreamliner. There's currently a backlog of 679 of these. They're planning to increase to 14 aircraft a month by the end of this year. $270.9 million will get you one of those. And last on the list then, you've got the 737 family. And there's a backlog, would you believe it, Matt? There's a backlog of the 737 aircraft of just over 4,500 aircraft.
But I suppose it's such a useful sized aircraft though, isn't it? I mean, you can, it fits into Ryanair's sort of scheme. It fits into so many different airlines.
Southwest
it's a good mid-range aircraft, isn't it?
Yeah, so they've got a production rate per month of 42 737s.
Wow.
But $103.4 million will get you one of these. But they're planning.
I assume these are list prices.
They're average prices. It's an average price of each aircraft, but Boeing are hoping to increase the production rate to 57 a month in 2019. To try and get rid of this backlog. That's one heck of a backlog though, Matt. 4,500 aircraft.
That is
so crazy. I mean, if you're going to get a job, go for a job at Boeing.
Yeah.
I think
you might have it for a bit longer. Yeah.
So next story, moving on, is on the travelweekly.co.uk website, and it's good news for EasyJet this summer. EasyJet to carry 67,500 passengers this summer. With special assistance. So for those of you travelling who require special assistance, I know my grandparents have a medium amount of special assistance when they're boarding, especially when they're travelling with Ryanair, where the gate is 4,000 miles away from the terminal building at Stansted. But an estimated 67,000 of EasyJet's 11.5 million passengers this summer will require some form of special assistance during their travels. The budget airline carries almost 500,000 people a year who need some form of special assistance, but many of those requiring special assistance are still deferred from flying through concerns about how they will be looked after. The airline recently improved its help pages for customers with a disability, but acknowledges that there's more to do, particularly for people with less visibly obvious disabilities. They've started to talk to leading charities which represent people with a range of such disabilities, and will be working with them over the coming months to see how they can make travel with the airline easier, a spokesperson said. It's important that our customers requiring special assistance let us know at least 48 hours before they fly so we can make the necessary arrangements. This comes against a backdrop of a 10% rise in the number of passengers requiring some form of assistance last year over 2015, and doubling from 232,703 in 2010. There are still major challenges ahead, not least the interface between the airline and the airports here and on the European continent, including the responsibility of all airports to provide assistance before boarding, the flight and baggage handling, which often have critical equipment, and they're still working on this. So this year we expect more than 2.5 million passengers with a disability or reduced mobility to take flights in and out of the UK, and they'll continue to work with the airports and airlines to ensure that assistance of a high quality and trips are completed as smoothly as possible. Now, Matt, a few years ago, actually last year as well, my grandparents flew to Malta with EasyJet, and one of the comments they made was how really, really incredibly well they were looked after by EasyJet on the ground, getting on board the aircraft.
I think to be fair, I mean, we had a very similar experience with that was EasyJet because we did special assistance for the very first time with my mum, and I must be honest that the support we got from them was absolutely astounding. But I think when it does come to that sort of thing, I don't think it matters which airline you use, because actually the special assistance is predominantly operated by the airport. It's only really the last bit where you're handed over to the cabin crew, if you like, where it's directly involved. So as long as you have to book it through your airline, I know that much, but once you've booked it with the airline, it's actually the airport that is predominantly responsible for how good your experience with that is. And I say from a personal experience, when it comes to Luton, I mean, Luton Airport's special assistance was absolutely fantastic. We've got the old Stearman going out again by the look of it.
Yeah, the Boeing Stearman's now going out again for another...
Was it a Boeing? I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Boeing Stearman. It's, I think this one, I forget the date of this one now, 1950 odd. I forget the date now, the year of this one.
It's got a couple of years under its belt.
It's got a few years under its belt. A ex-US Navy version, this one. Been very well looked after and maintained here at Old Buckenham by a group of people here. And it's hangared as well, kept nice and tidy and clean and dry in a hangar. Awesome looking aircraft though. We've had some video shots of that earlier, actually taking off in that, which is good.
Absolutely. Anyway,
so
the next
on.
story. This
next story
is on the Telegraph Business website, and the headline is Airbus cuts A380 production again as doubts grow over the future of the Super Jumbo. Obviously, we alluded to this story a couple of stories back here with our little chart. So the future of the Airbus's A380 Super Jumbo looks even more bleak after the Pan-European aircraft company said it was cutting production of the double-decker airliner. Reporting half-year figures, Airbus said that considering the current order booking situation, deliveries of the A380 will be reduced to just eight in 2019. At last year's Farnborough Airshow, the company said it would slow production to just 12 a year by 2018, down from the rate of 27 the year before. Demand for the giant four-engine aircraft has waned as airlines seek the efficiencies of smaller twin-engine aircraft. Airlines have ordered just 317 A380s so far. 213 have been delivered. Industry commentators have long speculated that the A380 program will be closed, and even senior executives from the company concede Airbus will struggle to make money on it. Aviation analyst Saj Ahmed from Strategic Aero Research said cutting the A380 underlines the marketing disaster that belies the program, and that Airbus is realising that even life support has to be turned off, and it's evident that day looms closer. Calling the Super Jumbo a variety project that needs to be killed off, he added, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? Even if a mooted order from Emirates emerges, it will not support a rate increase. It will be nothing more than Airbus having to make more A380s at a loss and still face the barrel of execution of the airplane. Airbus reported flat group sales at 28.7 billion euros, with net profit down 15% to 1.5 billion pounds. Billion euros. Underlying earnings eased at 3% to 1.8 billion euros. Although the figures were boosted by the 560 million euro sale of the defence electronics business and a 174 million euro currency windfall. I suppose that's the advantage, isn't it? Where the euro is doing okay. Adjusting for these and other similar charges, Airbus's preferred measure of performance earnings were 1.1 billion euros. That was down a massive 35%. Not good, is it really?
No, I mean the A380, as we all know, it's a huge aircraft. It's not to a lot of people's taste. A lot of people think it's ugly. The one in the story here is on the picture is a BA one, but I mean, I've flown on the 380 now a few times, and it is a really comfortable and nice aircraft to fly on. But I think there will come a time when this will get to the same kind of position as what the 747 is at now, where the airlines are going to start to move to slightly smaller aircraft with 2 engines as opposed to 4.
But it really hasn't been in production that long, has it?
No, this aircraft, the 380, is a relatively new aircraft still.
I mean, the 747, I can understand why it was.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's been in service for many, many years, and they're sort of decided now that actually, it's time to sort of look for different things. But I noticed Boeing hasn't really come up with a similar equivalent to the 747, and I guess again that shows market pressures, doesn't it?
That's an aircraft that you flew on.
Was that the Piper 28?
Yeah, that's with we flew on one of those with Captain Al.
Yeah.
Just taxiing in there.
Unfortunately, I can't get it in shot because it's right. You might just see it go across the back of this little glass thing in front of us here. You might just see it behind.
But no, it's a shame, really. I mean, I think if Airbus decide to re-engine the A380, they might get some joy, hopefully. And
indeed. On to the next story, please, Carlos.
So next story is on the usatoday.com site, and the headline is good news for Airbus, moving on then from Boeing on to Airbus, and they've delivered their 100th A350 wide-body jet. So Airbus has delivered its 100th A350 on Wednesday this week, handing over the milestone aircraft to customer China Airlines during a ceremony at the jetmaker's assembly line in Toulouse, France. The 100th A350 XWB, or extra wide body, milestone comes as we reach our fastest wide body production ramp up, on track to meet the target of 10 A350 deliveries per month by the end of 2018. Airbus CEO Fabrice Bruguet said in a statement that he's especially proud to deliver the aircraft to our long-standing customer China Airlines. The A350 setting new standards for long-haul air travel in terms of efficiency and comfort, thus being a perfect choice aircraft for China Airlines to expand its long-haul network. Airbus's inaugural A350 delivery was just in December 2014, when launch customer Qatar Airways became the world's first carrier to take one of the jets. And since then, Airbus deliveries, they've delivered a total of 14 to 14 airlines, amongst others, that now have the A350 in their fleets, being Cathay, Finnair, LATAM, Lufthansa, Singapore Airlines as well, to name but a few. In fact, it was a Singapore Airlines A350 that helped Airbus mark another milestone just this past October. That came when Singapore Airlines took possession of an A350 that Airbus commemorated as the 10,000th aircraft of all time to roll off its assembly lines. In the USA, Delta took delivery of its first A350 earlier this month. American and United also have ordered the A350 as well. However, this has since deferred their initial delivery schedules for the aircraft, raising uncertainty about the status of those orders. So it's becoming quite a popular jet now, the A350. This is kind of comparable to the Dreamliner in size and looks as well, I think.
Yeah.
But we always comment on the A350 as being the Zorro masked aircraft of the of the commercial jetliner world. I think most people would agree there. But it's good news then for Airbus, for 100 A350s. So they really are getting a move on with those aircraft.
Absolutely. Okay. I've just had an ad blocker come up on mine, so it's difficult.
Okay.
Just bear with me a moment.
I turned mine off.
Yeah, I don't know quite what happened there. It won't go away. Oh,
so
well,
you can probably hear it's quieter now. The
Yeah,
Saxon helicopter's gone. The Boeing Stearman as well is out on a joy
They'll
flight.
be back. Don't panic. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll give it a go. I'll see how I get on. We might have to get Carlos to carry on with it in a minute. But so it's the argus.co.uk is the website, and the headline is Gatwick Airport £1.15 billion boost, which is very exciting. So Gatwick Airport is investing £1.15 billion over the next 5 years, with £240 million planned for 2017-18 alone. This is part of plans for more growth and improved efficiency, while also maintaining its record levels of passenger satisfaction. This 2017 capital investment programme sets out Gatwick's investment strategy, which continues to improve facilities and transform service. This, since the airport changed ownership in December 2009, Gatwick has invested £1.5 billion. Projects include configuring stands to facilitate a changing aircraft mix, building a new hangar in partnership with Boeing, extending Pier 6 to increase pier service levels beyond its 95% target, adding a new domestic arrivals facility in the South Terminal, and continuing to roll out its self-service bag drop product. The commitment from its capital investment programme will bring Gatwick's total investment plans since change of ownership through to 2022 to a staggering £2.7 billion. Gatwick's construction director Raymond Maley said that since coming into independent ownership, Gatwick has delivered record growth in passenger numbers and long-haul services, while also taking passenger satisfaction levels to an all-new, all-time high. As we plan to grow towards 50 million passengers per annum, we will focus on efficiency and service so that our passengers continue to receive the airport experience they expect in the most sustainable manner possible. We will continue to develop the airport to meet the needs of our airlines and passengers, with improvements to the way we operate on the airfield and the service we offer in our terminals. These projects will be delivered in a way that will help us to realise our ambition to become the UK's most sustainable airport. Regarding future runway expansion, our financeable and deliverable scheme for a second runway remains on the table. We will deliver a new runway for Britain in addition to, or instead of, Heathrow. In addition to. Now that's interesting. Should the government give us the support now or in the future. Other projects that are on the horizon include a new arrivals facility, including a new baggage reclaim in South Terminal, a suite of IT projects supporting core airport functions. That's something to make everyone nervous. Expanding the departures lounge in both terminals, and extra parking. You can never go wrong with some extra parking. Improved access to the South Terminal for passengers and staff, using local buses to travel to and from the airport. Projects to support greater use of electric vehicles, continuing to reduce the airport's environmental impact. The capital investment programme is a rolling 5-year plan, which is published annually. This allows the CIP to be refreshed regularly and as market conditions and operational needs change.
You know, it must be a huge thing, Matt, for airports like Gatwick and Heathrow. They're both two incredibly large airports in the UK. And, once you've modernised one area, by the time you've got to the other end of the airport and modernised that, you've got to do it all again, because that other area is 10 years old. But there are some parts, I know I've flown into Gatwick last year a few times, and there are some parts that could do with a little bit of a sprinkling with some paint.
But it's like all these things. I mean, you've got to have some kind of remodelling program, if you like. Otherwise, you are literally you're just falling behind, aren't you? You're just, as you say, by the time you finish one bit, it's time to do it again. Yeah, very true.
So moving on to the next story. This one is a bit concerning. It's
you were telling me about this when you got here. I can't believe this sort of thing can happen.
I know,
especially the reason behind it.
Yeah, this one actually came onto the news feeds yesterday, Saturday the 29th. The headline was on the mirror.co.uk website, and the headline's plane carrying 99 people almost ran out of fuel as pilots forgot to retract the landing gear.
That's forgot to retract their landing gear.
Yes, it's something I never normally forget in the Cessna 150. You're going to work this one out. Come on, Matt.
Yeah,
why wouldn't I forget to retract the gear in a 150? Come on.
Because you don't have to.
Yes!
Well done, Lee.
Oh, he's such a legend,
that's a bit stressful.
I know. He's going to have to sit down now.
I've got enough going on today. Do you mind?
So the Air India flight AI-676 was flying between Kolkata and Mumbai. When it was forced to divert due to the alarming speed, it was losing fuel. So 2 pilots have been suspended after the aircraft they were flying, carrying 99 passengers, nearly ran out of fuel because they forgot to retract the landing gear. The Airbus A320 left Kolkata and was on 90 minutes into its 2.5-hour flight to Mumbai when the pair took the decision to divert to Nagpur, as they would not have made it to their final destination. A source revealed Air India flight AI676 has struggled to climb and flown at 24,000 feet compared to the usual 35,000 to 37,000 feet, travelling at 230 knots as opposed to 500 knots. Despite this, the air pilots only realised they'd forgotten to retract the landing gear when they attempted to lower it during their descent. The
really
extra
weird.
drag of the wheels undercarriage led to increased fuel burn, which, according to a senior pilot, would have been very noisy for the cabin crew and passengers and caused severe vibrations. He said it was surprising that no one complained about the poor flight quality, although he added that they may have thought they were flying through a monsoon, which could have been the cause.
Yeah, right.
Additionally, flying at lower altitudes would have led to more fuel being burned, as the air is a lot denser, causing poorer engine efficiency. The senior pilot for the airline said it was a miracle the pilots realised the aircraft was running low on fuel and blamed the unbelievable situation on a casual approach, adding that this lapse shows extreme poor situational awareness and complete breakdown of crew resource management, or CRM, between both pilots. The post-takeoff checklist includes checking if the landing gear has been retracted. They realised the landing gears were down only when they were preparing to land at Nagpur and running low on fuel. Dhananjay Kumar, a spokesperson for the airline, said that the pilots have been taken off flying duty while the incident is being investigated.
Yes.
Can't.
Now
This
we
is
were talking about
amazing.
this when you got here, actually, weren't we? We were talking
Yeah.
about this, and one of the things that you said is like, I don't know. I mean, was the light not working? You know, the one that says my landing gear is down. I mean, I assume there must be a light for this sort of thing that sort of, makes it clear that something isn't as it should be.
Oh, it's just you have three lights, three greens, three reds, three greens, all the gear is down, three reds, it's all up and locked and everything. But Lisboa Nelson's quite rightly said on the 150, 152 and 170 that you have to call out positive climbing but no gear up. He's right, because on the actual checklist, when you take off on the 150, you say positive, or you're positive, right, you'll climb.
Yeah.
Right,
Jeff
gear
Braithwaite has actually said in the chat room here, great point here, is like, I'm surprised they didn't tear the gear off at 300 knots.
Oh, no.
I mean, they're lucky that it stayed where it stayed locked and they were able to get it down on the ground, really. I mean, it's just so bizarre.
The noise that the gear makes in a 150 or 172, you've got something underneath you making a windy noise.
Yeah.
But in a commercial jetliner, that gear is huge.
Yeah, and noisy.
Yeah. And you've got wind brushing past it at 300 knots. So, it's just...
It is just a very, very bizarre story, isn't it? I can't believe... was that Tony S. saying, remember the APG crew in the Hawker simulator? They did the same thing.
Oh,
no.
That's probably pit flying.
Yeah. Oh, right. No, fair enough.
So moving on to the last news story in the commercial segment this week. It's we haven't had a top 10 for a little while, but this is a bit different. This is a top 11.
Excellent. Okay, then. Here we go.
So this top 11 then is the things airline cabin crew really wish passengers wouldn't stop doing. Yeah. So, in at
number 11.
Number 11 then is, this is quite an interesting one, I must admit. So now in at number 11 it's bad manners. Ask any flight attendant what they hate the most.
From the 70s, aren't they?
And it'll be bad manners in general. And...
You're right,
she said, I'll just read it. I'm serving you breakfast at 3 a.m. somewhere over Romania, and you can't even say please. How rude.
Indeed, at number 10.
At number 10, it's inconsiderate parents. Some people think it's okay to change their babies' nappies on their seats.
What?
It's not. It's
horrible.
Disgusting. People have to eat, sleep, and sit there for hours on end, and you can do none of these things comfortably if said seat smells of poo-poo.
Unpleasant things. In at number 9.
In at number 9, unruly passengers. You're not Jason Statham, and this isn't a Hollywood film where you have to be the hero. We're trained in self-defense, and we will restrain you if we think you're putting people in danger. And if you cause enough of a scene, you'll end up spending your holiday in the local nick.
Number 8.
At number 8, it's the Mile High Club.
Family show, Carlos. Family show. Have you proofread this?
I've proofread this. Don't
Don't panic.
Don't. There are far more romantic places to get frisky than a cramped cubicle on a passenger jet to Manchester.
Careful.
Believe me when I say that these toilets can get pretty filthy on a busy flight, and don't like having to knock on a door to break up said embarrassing moments.
Number 7.
So number 7, it is drunk people.
Oh, goody. Yes.
So
Jet 2 all over again.
we want everyone to enjoy their journeys, and who doesn't like a whiskey on the rocks while they board and sit back and relax on the beginning of their holiday. But if you're drunk and you, well, there we go. Then you inadvertently are sick on the seat in front of you.
Yeah.
Then the crew have to clean it up, and then if you get unruly on the flight, then you're going to have the police waiting for you at the other end.
Always nice. Number 6.
Number 6 is people wearing headphones.
What's the matter with wearing headphones? Surely that's what you want them to do.
I know. Well, if you're Nev, you'll have a pair of Sennheiser noise-cancelling headphones.
Yes.
So when when asking a passenger wearing headphones 3 times if they'd like tea or coffee, and they just shout yes without taking them out or turning the music down, you know who they are, and you're literally some of the worst people alive.
I mean, I know a lot of people get really stressed because if you're on the train, all you can hear is coming out the headphone. But on an aeroplane, let's be honest, you're not going to hear it over the engine noise, are you? Let's be honest.
Unless you're on the Dreamliner when it's quiet.
Anyway, finally in at number 5.
Number 5, asking if we're afraid of flying. Seriously, you'd be
Nothing wrong
surprised
with that.
how many passengers
Absolutely nothing wrong
ask
with
cabin crew, but aren't you scared of flying? It would be a sorry state of affairs if cabin crew were afraid of flying, wouldn't it?
Okay, yes, that is fair point. Number 4.
Number 4 is passengers messing up the toilets.
Right.
Sometimes it gets so bad we have to pour lemonade miniatures down the toilet to get rid of the unsightly marks left behind.
Always nice.
It's beyond gross. You wouldn't leave your toilet in that state at home, so why do it on a plane?
Number 3.
Number 3, it's throwing a strop because you didn't get your first meal choice. So they hate it when our cabin crew hate it when passengers have a meltdown when their meal choice is unavailable.
Right.
We never carry 100% of everything because that would be a waste and a huge massive storage space to store everything. When people start having a tantrum at 40,000 feet because they can't have their poached salmon, I feel like screaming, we've run out of fish, not fuel.
It's not quite naked, it's number 2.
Number 2, acting all entitled. So if this...
Isn't that how you get your upgrades into premium economy
it is me.
and stuff? Yeah.
If cabin crew had £1 for every passenger who asked, is there a seat phrase that I can say at checkout, or secret phrase that I can say at checkout that will get me an upgrade, there'd be a wealthy cabin attendant.
Well, that is true.
The phrase you're after is, may I purchase an upgrade? Here is my credit card. And much as they'd love to offer you one, telling me it's your birthday or wearing your fanciest clothes won't get you an upgrade. I've seen and heard every trick in the book 1,000,000 times over. Well, I have to say, I wore my best clothes.
Did you?
And I, asked nicely, and I got an upgrade.
Okay, all right. I still don't believe you.
Plus, emailing the airline before you fly is also a good idea.
And also mentioning that you might do an aviation-related podcast about every single week, so therefore be nice to me. In at the very top of the chart is number 1.
Ooh, number 1. So
this must be for anyone who works cabin crew on the budget airlines.
Is Owen listening?
I think he is, yeah.
Owen, this is for you on Harpjet. You'll know this one. So at number 1, the worst thing hated by cabin crew, too much hand luggage.
Yeah.
So passengers are always bringing on too much luggage and expecting the cabin crew to put it in the overhead locker. If a 15-stone man can't lift it above his head, then they certainly can't. And I have to say, I've seen this a few times where people struggle to lift their overweight hand luggage cases into the overhead bins. And I just, there we go. Number 1, there we go.
Yeah.
So that was then the 11 things that airline cabin crew really wish passengers would stop doing. And that was on the Manchester Evening News.
Thanks to them for that.
So that's where we bring the news segment of the show today, live from Old Buckenham, to a close. So throughout the day we're going to keep streaming. We're going to bring you some live shots of the airfield here at Old Buckenham and some of the aircraft that are flying on display. We're going to come back to you periodically throughout the day, and hopefully we'll have some people chatting. We're going to come back, talking back live
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, as I say, that's the end of the commercial segment. So we've got two pieces to play out to.
Are we
going to
play those now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
So we've got one for you. I think what we're going to do, we're going to go down the BBC route. I think.
Oh, we're doing
first.
the BBC one first.
I think we should do that first. Now,
wow.
many listeners will be aware of the fact that the BBC's travel correspondent is an absolutely charming chap by the name of Richard Westcott, and the BBC did very, very well. Not the BBC. Nev did very, very well. He popped up. Oh, hello. You're waving at me.
How does Nev do this?
I know.
Nev has got contacts in more places than a contactless card.
Wow. Yeah. Well, there is that. Yes, I know. But he's been in the industry for years, hasn't he?
Yes.
You know. But yeah. So anyway, Nev took a little bit of a stroll up to BBC Broadcasting House, and what I'm about to play you is the results. So sit back and enjoy.
Hello, it's Nev here again, and today I'm at the BBC at New Broadcasting House in a very posh studio. I have with me BBC's transport correspondent, Richard Westcott. Hello, Richard.
Hello, yeah. I know it looks posh, but it doesn't feel like that when it doesn't work sometimes.
And you were just telling me early on, this is the studio you come into when there's a story breaking and you have to do something fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, for plane crashes, for example, you know, I have to go on the TV very quickly and on the radio, and this would be, because it's very close to my desk, one of the studios I'd run into and then do, say, Radio 4, Radio 5, perhaps Radio 2 if they're on air and they want something like that, some of the local radio if they want it, and then run downstairs and do the telly as well. So, yes, I could do everything from here. Kind of
interesting. Tell me about your career. How did you get into being a journalist specifically for transport?
Well, I was a generic journalist probably for about 15 years, something like that. I was a breakfast telly reporter. I was at Radio 1. I was on local radio, did a bit of presenting on local radio, that kind of thing. And the way the BBC works, basically, when the jobs come up, you go for them and you gen up as quickly as you can to become an expert in that area. So the people who become the health correspondents aren't necessarily experts in health, economics, the same thing, politics, the same thing. But it does help to have a real interest. So when I went for this job, I think there were about 14 other people going for it. It was at one of those musical chairs sort of periods in the BBC's life where a few people were being made redundant and so it was very competitive to get this job. And luckily, I happen to love aeroplanes and cars and motorbikes and all that kind of stuff. So that did give me a head start. But I wasn't an expert as such.
Do you prefer being a specialist rather than a generalist, if you don't mind me asking that question?
Yeah, no, I like it more. You can just get into the depth of the story a little bit more. And with transport, basically, there are regional transport correspondents and really good ones as well for the BBC, but I'm the only national one. So frankly, when a big story happens, I get to do it. And when you're in another field, you're often bumped by someone who's frankly better than you, higher up the chain than you, sort of thing. So at transport, I kind of get to do the big stories.
Now, we were talking earlier on, obviously this is an aviation podcast, so we're going to be talking about aviation today. In terms of the equipment that you have available to you now, it's fantastic, from radio scanners to ADS-B tracking, this kind of thing. Does that make your job easier in a sense?
It makes it harder in some ways in that everybody can see when an aircraft is squawking they're in trouble. And so I get these constant emails saying there's someone circling over Manchester and they're, losing fuel and keep an eye on it kind of thing. I think we all know how often that happens around the world. So it can be a little bit sort of people jump the gun a little bit thinking there is an emergency when there isn't. Where it is really useful is people recording images of things that have happened. You get a much clearer idea of things that have happened much sooner because people on board the aircraft or people watching are filming it and they make their way into the public domain pretty quickly. So I guess in some ways good, in some ways bad, but there is no substitute for human beings and talking to human beings, I find. So you get all the information you like on your iPhone or whatever it is you're using, but talking to pilots, talking to investigators, that's how you get to the nub of what's really happened for me.
And do you get the chance to do that as part of your work?
I'm pretty lucky. So I've formed over the years a good relationship with the AAIB. I've been down and looked at all their equipment, and I've had a look in their listening room, for example, where they would replay back the messages from black boxes. And so, it's all electronically sealed, and they show me what they do with the black box, and you've got to dry them all out, first of all the circuits and the special oven for that. And they've got 4 speakers around the room because they want to recreate what the sound would have been like in the cockpit, so they're trying to recreate as accurately as possible what everyone on board would have been hearing. They tell me who's allowed in that room and who isn't allowed in that room. So I get all of that sort of unique information in advance, and then that means I can go on the telly pretty quickly and give an accurate description of what would really happen. So they got the data recorders, for example, from MH17, I think it was, and then they came back to the UK. And so when that happened, I was able to say roughly what the room looked like and what they would be doing and how it would all work. So it really helps in that respect.
Well, personally speaking, I've always been very impressed with the way that you report the story, the accuracy with which you do it. I've noticed so much in the press and also on social media the sensationalisation of some of these events, which really have turned out to be non-events. How are you able to filter out all the rubbish and actually get to the real story?
And people want answers, don't they? And they want them quickly. And frankly, editors at the BBC are the same as everybody else. They'll read something and say, oh, I heard there was a missile going off. I heard there was another plane in the vicinity. All of that sort of chatter going on around these sort of major accidents. And it is my job, I think you're right, to actually plough through that and get to the facts. So I tend to write in my scripts, what we actually know so far is this, what it could suggest is this. So I think you do need to go down those realms of speculation a little bit, but I think the evidence can point you that way. So if there are obvious telltale signs, perhaps in the way that the debris is scattered around, for example, can tell you how the aircraft broke up, whether it was mid-air, whether it hit the ground. There are conclusions you can draw with some of the evidence that's in front of you, but I try never to do that without speaking to an accident investigator, a former accident investigator, a pilot, an expert, basically, to double-check what I'm thinking. So I think I do probably go on air and say, well, these are the possibilities, it's probably not that, it probably is that. But I try to couch it in honest terms. I try to explain why I'm thinking that, and I try and back it up with people who really know their stuff, who've properly investigated these things and know what they're talking about. So certainly hopefully that keeps it in check.
Yeah, very much so. And certainly the guys in the studio with me, Carlos and Matt, we're reading stories every week, and we talk about, we're reading, it could be the Daily Mail, it could be any publication actually, and it talks about a 777 that's had a problem, and they show a picture of an A320. That's fairly typical of some of the written press. How difficult is it for you to make sure that that all the picture editors you're working with have got all the right content, even if it's library?
That is really tricky, and I'm often the one shouting at the telly as well. But to some extent, there are people around the BBC who just like aircraft, who will notice these things when things go out live on air. If it's wrong, often someone internally will just notice because it's their interest as well. So it doesn't tend to last for long. People are professionals as well. They're used to putting this stuff out. They normally double check. Things are well labelled in the library. But there is an element of once a piece of misinformation has got out, it's very hard to kind of close the door afterwards. I do have a system basically on my iPhone. I can put something on an email and it will go out to the entire BBC. It goes on our internal wires system, and I can put urgent, from Richard Westcott, please stop saying this, it isn't that. That works to some extent. It can stop the fact being, or the lack of facts being repeated. So there are kind of ways I can get messages to people, but sometimes it takes 3 or 4 goes, because you'll just hear it, and there's so much output on the BBC, you'll just hear it somewhere obscure, and then sometimes they just ring up and say, actually, you're getting that wrong. So hopefully there's enough checks and balances. And
how about social media? How do you use that? How do you use Twitter, for example?
To get a lot of information, so it's a great place to just kind of go, has anyone got any expertise in this area? And obviously you double check what people are telling you afterwards. But it's very handy for people who've worked in certain places, flown certain types of aircraft, who just happen to know what they're talking about. And as I say, we then talk to them privately away from, Twitter tends to be the one we use, double check they are who they say they are and their credentials and so on. So it's very useful for gleaning information, and also for putting out information. If there are things that are out there that are wrong and you find out they're wrong, you can say, well, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that, and you hope it gets retweeted. It is when the big stories come along, and I sort of, like is the wrong word because you're often talking about tragedies, but the puzzles of when things go wrong with aircraft, it is interesting trying to get to the bottom of it. MH370 is probably the most interesting story I've ever covered. And it's, I'm still in touch with a lot of the families and a lot of the people who've taken a keen interest in that, and it's still incredibly frustrating not knowing what's happened to that aircraft. So I find all of that fascinating. Really. I went to Malaysia to talk to the sister of the pilot of MH370.
Gosh.
Well, that was amazing. She's a fantastic woman, Sakinab Shah. Really interesting person, really rational. You would sort of think she'd sit there and go, oh, no, it wouldn't be my brother kind of doing that. It couldn't possibly. She had very rational answers for why she really didn't think it was her brother, because he was just actually a pretty ordinary guy with a nice, happy, stable family life. She lived around the corner from him. All the family knew him. So, that gives you a unique insight. And to be able to get to go and do things like that behind the scenes, I think is just fascinating. A, it's an amazing place to visit, and B, she's an amazing woman to meet.
A lot of reporting, or a lot of reporters may not have that opportunity. And you've made the effort to go and do that, so it gives you a much better insight behind the tragedy that unfolded. Clearly.
Yeah, I think I need to give that as well, because I am a specialist. I can't just say what's on all the wires. I have to give that background information. So if something's happened to an aircraft, the first thing I do is ring a pilot of that type of aircraft and just say, okay, so, what do the switches look like? When this is happening, what alarms would be going off? What would they sound like? Get that real detailed information, because then I want to go on the radio and the telly and explain what's actually happening, what it all would have looked like, what it all would have sounded like. And because I'm a specialist, I'm able to do that. I've got a bit of space and time to do that, so that's a real privilege, I think.
From your point of view, what's the most difficult part of your job?
It is getting it right. It's the deadlines. The fact is, TV is very logistical, so I actually haven't got hours to sit there and plough through and get all the facts absolutely perfect, because just sorting out where TV crews go, who you interview, getting the pictures is so complex. That is 90% of television. And it's frustrating not to have more time to dig down into the story. So I think that's what's tricky. Say something happens at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm cutting a piece for the 6 o'clock news that night. You're also doing all the radio as well. And just that sort of panic, really, about getting everything absolutely right and accurate, and getting good pictures and getting interesting guests to talk to, and producing it something that makes sense and tells the story and is right. Would
you prefer to be slightly later with the story, but at least you have more accuracy and more depth, rather than trying to break it too soon?
I think it's a really good question. I get asked this a lot. I did a conference for the AAIB, their 100-year anniversary. I spoke at the conference, so that was a real honour and a fabulous day as well. And I've spoken at international accident investigator conferences, and they all say the same thing. Why'd you rush to get it on air? Why don't you wait until you know what's happened and then put out all the facts? But that just isn't the way news works. That's not the way editors work. Everybody else is putting stuff out there. It's a competitive industry. We have to say something. And the way I get round that is to have that background knowledge, is to go on air and say, look, okay, this is what we know, this is the type of aircraft, this is how old it was, this is what accident investigators will be looking for when they arrive on the scene, these are the clues we have so far, but it's early days. So I go on air as quickly as I can, but I don't pretend that I know exactly what's happened, and that's kind of my way around it.
There's a lot of pressure, presumably, from the editorial team to get something on air as soon as you can, and maybe if it's a 5 o'clock story that's breaking for the 6, as an example, that must be very difficult from your point of view.
It's very, very difficult. It did happen. It's normally on a Friday. There tend to be aircraft accidents. Even the pilots say that.
Yes.
You know, there was they had a battery fire on a Dreamliner at, I'm pretty sure it was Heathrow.
Yeah, that's right.
So it wasn't the main. So obviously, there'd been battery fires with the Dreamliners, and that was a huge story. And actually, I went to Ethiopia to see how Boeing were mending those batteries, or the system they put in place to stop the fire spreading, rather than mending. And we went on the first flight of a Dreamliner after it was grounded. This was after that. It was a different type of fire, it turns out, in the end. But that happened, or we found out about that, at about 5 o'clock on a Friday. Frankly, I was just walking out the door, and suddenly everyone wants a piece of the story, the radio, the TV. And it turns out the aircraft that caught fire was the one I'd been on in Ethiopia.
Was it really?
So we actually saw the sort of code on it, and I was able to go on telly and just say, I've been on that aircraft. I know they fixed the batteries on that particular aircraft because I watched them do it.
Gosh.
So I was able to give a bit of insight that it probably wasn't a similar battery problem to the one that had grounded the other aircraft.
Yeah.
But it's panicky. definitely.
Yes, I can imagine that. What's the most challenging part about your job? I've said what's after you. What's the most difficult? What are the biggest challenges that you face?
Well, for me, I like to go and find stories that are interesting but a little bit different, but it's kind of hard to find the space to go and do that. So I do the day-to-day stuff. Where are they going to build a runway, in the southeast of England? What's happening with the Southern Rail strike? All the obvious day-to-day stuff. But I like to go away and find developments in various industries that are a bit different and unique. So recently we went up in the Siemens electric plane. That took a bit of
I saw the piece you did
to
that.
sort
yeah,
out. But it's so fascinating to get, and so quiet
when
you're going up in it.
Yes.
And so actually to make that happen and get the resources to make that happen, regardless of what people think, we're not awash with money. I can't just turn up and say to an editor, I want to go here, there, or everywhere, and will you pay for it?
Yes.
I have to justify it. So it's just balancing, really, the day-to-day stuff, which I have to be around for, with that interesting, quirky stuff that predicts the future of transport that everyone loves.
Yes,
it takes a bit of finding.
Yeah, it does. I was going to ask you about that because obviously there's the very dynamic situation of real-time aircraft accidents and incidents, but then of course there's the ongoing stuff of things like the third runway, which I think we're into about the 16th year now of discussion about it. I feel it's coming to an end at some point, but there's always a story, and there's always a political story surrounding it as well. How do you cover that kind of thing?
It keeps me going.
Yes.
Things like that. HS2, another one, the high-speed railway. These stories just rumble on and on and on. I do wonder sometimes if that runway will ever get built. It seems in a good place at the moment, but then it did before when Labour approved it.
Yeah.
They're great stories like that because they get me on air, because they're interesting, because they involve a lot of money and a lot of people's lives. And I try to cover every aspect from the politics and the big economics down to the people who have to live under the flight path and suffer the pollution and all the rest of it. So I do enjoy those stories, and they are my bread and butter. And I know they'll never resolve, really. So that's the other thing. I don't expect to be doing this job if they ever put a spade in the ground and start building that.
No, it's endless content, really, isn't it, from your point of view?
Speculation, yeah. And everyone's saying to me, is this going to happen now? And I think, I don't know, because no one can say. What's always interesting about these stories is I turn up and say, well, what do you think is going to happen like that? And they turn up and say, what do you think is going to happen? Everyone is a bit in the dark.
Yeah.
And it tends to come down to the politicians. And then half the time they don't know.
Yeah.
So people are not as well informed quite often as everyone thinks. They just go by what they read in the papers, the gossip, and what they think the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the time are going to do. And they're often the two most important people.
And these stories develop tremendous amounts of momentum as well. And you eventually get to the real story, or maybe there isn't a real story. So there's actually a lot of chatter and background information without any real conclusion for the time being. Do you find that a lot?
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, I'm regularly kind of rung at weekends saying there's this little bit of gossip in the paper, and it'll be some MP has leaked something to some newspaper saying, oh, Heathrow's a goner. I remember when George Osborne was supposedly going to, ditch HS2, and then it was going to come back, and then someone else was going to ditch Heathrow, and then what happens if Boris Johnson becomes Prime Minister? It's endless gossip. It's endless. Oh, this is it. That's the end of the project. And then suddenly, a month later, the government's making big announcements how it's all going to go ahead. So it's a bit of a roller coaster. I treat a lot of it with a pinch of salt now. I've learnt that.
Yes. And do you have a good relationship with people like the Transport Secretary, for example? So not saying you necessarily get the inside story, but at least you have a fair crack of the whip when it comes to briefing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've had 3 Transport Secretaries now, so in 5 years. It was Justine Greening when I first started, and Patrick McLaughlin, and now Chris Grayling.
Yeah.
Actually, I thought they're all very nice people. I've got on with them. They're good to talk to once you actually meet them face to face. And they've got nice staff around them. So actually, yeah, I do feel that we have a good relationship, really. And I try to get on with all of those people in government, because they're the people who give you the information, not that they hand out that much. I guess the problem with some of this stuff is a lot of it comes from the Treasury. That's sort of a little bit off my patch. So to an extent, the Department for Transport is told what to do by the Treasury. So half the time, they don't know. But yeah, we keep as good relations as we can with all the politicians, because, as I say, actually they're the people that make the decisions in the end.
And do you get sort of advanced briefing, advanced information about things that the government are proposing to actually put out into the public domain?
Sometimes. We always ask for it. We will sometimes get things on embargoes because they're big and they're complex. And my argument is always, if you want me to go on telly 3 minutes later and explain what you're saying or explain the story, and you want me to be accurate, not just basically speed read an executive summary and then make it up as I'm going along, desperately trying to get the facts right, well, then I need some advance notice. But that is quite common practice around journalism. You know, we are given an advance peek on some of the more complex stuff. Not all the time. Sometimes we do get things thrown at us last minute. But yeah, I mean, we always try to get it because it makes our job easier in terms of accuracy.
Yes, of course. Well, that's been absolutely superb. Thanks very much indeed, Richard. And we always ask all of our guests, you're clearly an aviation enthusiast, what would be your favourite plane to fly on, either current or in the past?
SR-71.
Oh, right, okay.
No doubt at all.
That was a very definite response.
I started writing a children's book. I never managed to get it published. I keep going back to it, but it's all about the pilot's experience of flying. What it's actually like to fly some of these aircraft. So I've spoken to some Blackbird pilots. It's just amazing. I mean, they used to heat their food on the window, it got so hot, so they'd hold the tube up against it.
Yeah.
And they had these fantastic medicals before they flew, because the navigator at the back wasn't able to fly the aircraft, and the pilot at the front wasn't able to navigate the aircraft. So if one or other of them got ill, they were in real trouble. They couldn't bring that thing down. I just think it's the most amazing piece of engineering, fascinating aircraft. It's a real shame they ditched it, because it could still be doing a good job today.
And that's so often the case, isn't it? We're finding, not just in the military but in the civil world, it's all been a bit sort of, everyone's looking at economics all the time, so actually high performance aircraft, certainly in the civil world, is very rare these days. It's all about economy and trying to make the passenger fares and all the rest of it more reasonable, I guess.
It is. I am fascinated to see if anyone ever makes supersonic passenger flight viable, in terms of how polluting it is, as well as how expensive it is and how noisy it is. We'll see. It would be fantastic if they could come up with some kind of propulsion system that would get us around really quickly and not, wreck the planet and be really noisy. So I hope that someone is able to do something along those lines, and that's the... I don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime, though.
I think we always say the same thing. We always wish it does, but we don't know. Thanks ever so much for today, Richard. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been fun.
Find this and other great shows at the Aviation Media Network.
thevoicesinyourhead.com.
The Plain Talking UK podcast is a voluntary project that aims to keep you informed with the latest aviation-related stories from newswires across the globe.
Producing our content does cost money though. If you enjoy our show, why not help us keep on the air by making a donation towards the server and website hosting fees through PayPal. Any contributions would be greatly appreciated.
Are you an Amazon user? If so, why not do your shopping through the link on our website? There's no cost to yourself, and Amazon pay us a small referral fee on qualifying purchases.
To find out more about the show and to meet the team, take yourself to our website www.plaintalkinguk.com,
or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/plaintalkinguk, on Twitter via @plaintalkinguk, or get in touch via email on podcast@plaintalkinguk.com. Thanks for listening.
Flybe 5823, Trent Dane for 23R Manchester, Wizz Air 6X, climb flight level 210, direct to Bretlands Park. United 123, maintain 280 knots. London 2TME, turn right onto Bravo, link, 21 join Alpha, hold at Mora, Speedbird 472, LOC/TME, approach runway 27 left, follow the green stand 544.
That's enough air traffic control for today, Nat. Bedtime.
Aviation media has long been the domain of the newspapers and magazines.
Well, not anymore. I'm Steve Vischer.
And I'm Grant McCarran, and we're bringing aviation right into your radio.
Yes, we're making aviation cool and interesting for everyone.
Hang on, aviation's always been cool. Check this out.
How cool is this?
Grant, turn that down. Here at Plane Crazy Down Under, we've got pilots, engineers, air traffic controllers, industry leaders, even politicians dropping by to talk to us about the amazing world of aviation right here in Australia and occasionally in New Zealand as well.
Wow, that's cooler than I thought, mate.
Find us at planecrazydownunder.com, on iTunes, or lurking about on other people's podcasts just like this one.
We've got crazy accents and lots of great aviation content.
And we promise not to talk about the cricket.
No, never. Not the cricket. Quack, 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 quack. What is cricket anyhow?
Something we win a lot. Oh, there
Oh!
So we're going to say a massive thank you to our amazing co-host Neville Bounds for doing that. I'll tell you what. I mean, what's he going to do next? The Queen?
I don't know. Yeah. He's going to contact the Queen. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she liked aeroplanes apparently.
It's, I mean, Nev just has so many strings in his bow.
He does.
He's got like an orchestra.
But also, what a lovely chap Richard Westcott is. A very insightful interviewer. Several of you said in the chat room here. Really nice, and it's quite nice to see that somebody at the BBC has a similar passion for our sort of inaccurate media reporting as we do. That's it's great to hear. So we've got a little bit of ATC going on in the background, as you can probably hear. We are live from the Old Buckenham Airshow, as you can probably see if you're watching on YouTube. Did we get a definitive what that is in front of us?
That's
the little glass thing, wasn't it?
EZ something like that. I'll have to look it up.
Okay, that's all right. That somebody in the chat room will point it out to us in a minute. So
So we obviously, as Matt just said, we are at the Old Buckenham Airshow here in the county of Norfolk.
We are indeed. We've got
coast.
about 45 minutes before the live flying starts. So the flying programme, I think, starts at 1 o'clock. Carlos is just going to bring up a quick schedule, give us a rundown of what we've got to look forward to today.
So on today's flying acts, which have been confirmed, we've got the Supermarine Spitfire MH434. That's going to be doing a fly display. And we've got Matt Summers with the Vans RV8 as well. Nigel Wilson's going to be here in his Yak 52. We've also got one of the popular displays teams here in the UK, the Wildcats.
Yes,
they're going to be here. We've got the Extra and the Model Extra flying, which Matt saw yesterday.
Yeah, that was amazing.
That's the Extra. I think it's a 500 with a little mini remote-controlled one.
In fact, actually, if you're watching the YouTube lead, here's a little bit of a preview of what we were looking forward that we were watching yesterday. It's absolutely amazing. What's the actual aircraft?
It is the Extra 500, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a radio-controlled version that's exactly the same. So if you're watching the YouTube, you can just see a little of what we recorded yesterday, actually. And it was so amazing to see the two sort of flying side by side. But we'll be covering that. We'll be covering all of the air show live as soon as we finish this particular, the actual show, and then we'll bring you some edited highlights later on in the year.
So we've got the Hawker Hurricane as well. She'll be flying in later. Otto the helicopter, which if you were watching earlier on the show, you would have seen Otto the helicopter flying with the big eyes on the front. It's one of those crop spraying helicopters, Matt.
Really?
Which, they kind of little big bubble cockpit sort of glass on those. Brendan O'Brien's Flying Circus as well will be flying later. They're going to be landing on the trailer. They're going to have an aircraft actually land on the trailer of a moving car.
That was ridiculous.
We've got the Beechcraft Stagger Wing. That's also going to be flying as well today. We've got Rod Dean. I don't quite know he's flying. It doesn't say here on the list. But we've also got the Shark P51 Mustang. Now that's pretty awesome Mustang. Got the shark teeth on the front engine cowling on that, so that's really, really easy to spot. And
nice
also, later on in the show, I think this is coming up later on this afternoon, we've got the B-17 Flying Fortress, the Sally B. That's going to be flying over here from the Duxford Imperial War Museum, where me and Matt were a few weeks back. with Nev, and that's going to be doing a fly past here. Don't think that's going to be landing. I don't think the runway's quite long enough here at Old Buck for the B-17 to get in, but she'll be doing an awesome fly past here of the airfield and the show. So Matt, how are you warmed up now? Because the sun is actually out here.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a bit chilly earlier, but as I say, it's the minute the sun came out, it improved massively. It's turning out to be a very nice day.
It certainly is. So later on in the show, we've got another segment, haven't we, Matt?
We have.
From Nev. What's that one entailing? Do you know?
Yes, it's again. Nev's been at it again. This is part of the usual passenger experience segment that we've been running of late, and that's another instalment. Again, one of Nev's friends. But another chap by the name of Richard, but we'll be playing with Cobalt, I think, if my memory serves, Richard Cobourne, and we'll be playing that out very shortly.
Awesome. So we're going to bring some live footage now. I think would be quite good.
Well, we can certainly give it a try. As I said, the actual air show doesn't start until 1 o'clock. It's now 12:20 here on Sunday, the 30th of July. I think what we're going to do, actually, as I say, because the air show doesn't start till a bit later, what we're going to do is we're going to play that interview that Nev did for us. So this is the latest instalment in our passenger experience, or Nev's passenger experiences, as I say, and this is a friend of his, and here is Nev to introduce it now.
Hello everybody, it's Nev here again with another passenger experience. Well, as a presenter, it's inevitable, I suppose, that several of your interviewees turn out to be among your favourites, and this is definitely one of them, I have to say. Back in June of this year, I had a chat with a very good friend of mine, Richard Cobourne, at the club at the Ivy in London, where we had just finished one of our famous networking lunches. Richard has a long history of working as a producer and director in television, radio, exhibitions and live events. These days he can be found sitting in his garden shed studio just over the English-Welsh border, maybe recording a voiceover for an American company or perhaps polishing up a chapter for the novel that he is currently writing. In his professional life, Richard has travelled a great deal with many different airlines, and it would be fair to say that he has strong opinions regarding how they have served him over the years. I began by asking him his record for the number of flights he had ever taken.
One year I took 91 flights. By any stretch of the imagination, that's sort of up to the same scale, I guess, as some of the flight crew. And you do become pretty jaded, as I'm sure you imagine. Yes, I was gold on BA, yes, I was gold on KLM, but then you start to ask yourself, what separates the airlines? What actually makes one airline better than another airline? What is it that makes you choose Lufthansa over BA, over KLM, over EasyJet? It's the customer service, it has to be, because let's be honest, you sit in a metal tube and you fly from airport to somewhere else. There is no difference. Ho-hum, you might almost say. You take off, you go along in the air and you land. So the only thing that airlines have got to differentiate itself is the service on the ground and the service in the air. To some extent you then get the choice of airport. And when we lived in Cardiff, I used to use Cardiff Airport a hell of a lot, because BA Regional flew from there. KLM flew from there. Now, BA Regional packed up many years ago, which was hugely disappointing because I was a regular user. KLM, on the other hand, are sensational because they've maintained a wonderful regional network throughout the UK. You can fly from Newcastle, Birmingham, Manchester, Scotland, you know, wherever you want, Varskifol, to anywhere in the world. And, you know, that's the bit that you really have to think about. For somebody that doesn't live in a major city, like London, for example, to get to your airport is a real faff. KLM identified this fact and made it easy for you to travel from a regional airport to anywhere in the world.
Would you drive up the M4 to Heathrow or Gatwick? Because I know you've got some property in Fuerteventura in the Canary Islands. Would you go that far just to get your points?
Unequivocally, no. Why not, you might ask? Well, the reason is that, let's just talk about BA. They have so devalued the customer loyalty programs that actually there is no real true incentive remaining loyal. I was thinking about this the other day. You know, the recent series of BA strikes did huge damage, not because of the fact I couldn't fly BA, because BA forced me to fly on other airlines. And you suddenly realised BA aren't up there. They're off the pace. And in fact, I think if you look at the top 20 airlines in the world now, BA are no longer there. And I think they've got to take a long, hard look at themselves. Why don't I travel to Heathrow, which is 2 hours, 2 hours 10, when I travel to Bristol, which is 45 minutes? The choice is EasyJet, the choice is BA or one of the major airlines. Reason? Simple. There's no differential advantage of flying with BA. I get on board EasyJet, who, by the way, have now made me a flight club member, a service and a level I didn't even know existed. You get on board, you can have extra leg room. If you're a Speedy Plus member, you get it for free. If you're not, you pay 22 quid. You can have a cup of coffee, £2.50. You can have a very nice sandwich. You can have a drink. You pay for it. It does exactly what it says on the tin. And I think that's the issue. You get on board British Airways now, and unless you're travelling in first class long haul, frankly, I can't see any differential advantage for all the hassle you have to put up with going through the large airports. You know, let's be honest, if you're travelling from Heathrow, you've really got to allow 2 hours to park the car, get from the car into the terminal, or even come from the train or the Heathrow Express into the terminal, go through security. You know, the queues, the people, etc., when flying from Bristol, I think it's about 12 minutes from arriving at the airport into the car to actually be sitting in the lounge ready to take off. And I think that's the problem. You get the sense sometimes these big major airlines don't travel enough with each other. And I don't think that they experiment enough with the various methods of travel. I doubt whether anyone from BA has recently flown from Bristol or Cardiff and actually looked at what's going on there. And I think that they've got to look holistically at the whole travel experience. Hamish Taylor was responsible for relaunching and invigorating BA Club Europe. He looked very carefully at the whole service, and he was the person that realised that if you've just flown across the Atlantic and want to go into a meeting, you want to be fresh and revived. And he was the person that brought in the arrival experience, the arrival showers. And he also looked at the whole thing, from the moment that you booked your ticket to the moment you actually were in your car out of the airport. And I think that's what a lot of airlines have forgotten. The holistic experience from the moment you book the ticket. And sometimes that's very disappointing. You also, of course, get on board and have an expectation of the service you're going to receive, be it in economy, be it in club, be it in first. And if that falls short, well, you have a whole 4, 5, 6, 14, 24 hours to fume. I don't know, it's like a fire, burning, raging, suddenly realising by the time you get off the aircraft, you're so bloody annoyed by the fact that they ran out of tomato juice or champagne, you get off and you're just furious.
The properties that you've bought in the Canary Islands, were they as a result of the direct connectivity that you have from the west of England?
Where anybody chooses to buy a property is dependent upon a number of factors. We chose Fuerteventura because it's got an all-round great climate. The character of the island, the culture, the scenery suited us. But of course a major part of that was, can we get there? Now, Bristol Airport is 25 minutes from our house. EasyJet, it's a major EasyJet hub, so there's dozens and dozens of EasyJet aircraft. So if you get one going tech, it's pretty easy for them to bring in another one, which has happened. You're looking for reliability of service, and obviously you're looking at cost as well. That, I think, is where EasyJet really scores. They're delivering exactly the service that you need at a price that is difficult to beat. That made the whole thing work. We couldn't have done it unless we were able to get to Fuerteventura very easily. So it's a whole range of reasons, but certainly the transport is vitally important. And not just in the air, but also the check-in experience and the experience in the lounges and how easy it is to board, and the in-flight service. It's vital.
Now, you and I are BA fans. How are they going to get back from where they are at the moment? It's a catastrophe, frankly, isn't it?
I think it depends who you ask. And that is the problem. Who is your customer? Who are you trying to satisfy? If your prime goal is to satisfy BA shareholders, possibly you might be considered that you're actually doing a good job. If your prime objective is to look after the customers, I think there's a lot to be examined. look after the customers and the profit will look after itself. And I think BA have forgotten that. I also think they have been seduced by trying to compete with the budget airlines. You won't do it. Their corporate infrastructure is too large. Their overhead is too large. So what's left to compete upon? You've only got one thing, and that is customer service. If you're spending, I don't know, £3,500 to go business class across the Atlantic, the difference between £3,500 and £3,800 to most people buying business class is irrelevant. But that extra bit of money would go so far in improving the services, both on the ground and in the air. And I think that's where BA have really, really, really got to look at this. You know, I was a gold card holder. I'm blue. Why? There is no difference between BA and EasyJet. Some people might say that's nonsense. Even if I'm travelling BA business, as I still do, okay, I might have nobody sitting next to me. I might possibly have slightly better bit of food. I might possibly have a free drink. But that's not enough to keep me loyal to BA. They've got to do more. And I think they have got themselves into the situation of forgetting who their core customer group are and forgetting what keeps people loyal to BA and what makes people loyal to EasyJet. What makes people loyal to EasyJet is a cost-effective flight with a service that they know that they're going to get. What makes people disloyal to BA is the prices are not competitive and the service is variable, and there is nothing worse than a service that is variable that is also lets you down. We talked about somebody where there was a flight where the champagne ran out 30 minutes into the flight. That's not acceptable. Not acceptable when you've probably just spent £50 to £100 more than you could on EasyJet, where they don't run out of champagne, but you're paying £7 a bottle. Which would you prefer? You want certainty. And I think people in business, people who are flying professionally as opposed to for leisure, and that's the other big difference. Yes, 80% of flights now are for leisure, but 20% of flights are definitely for business. And business have certain demands and certain requirements that are different to the leisure traveller. And I think that BA have completely and utterly forgotten that.
Talk to us about luggage, Richard.
Hamish Taylor was the guy that invented that funny metal cage that you put your luggage in when you're checking in. Because he said that if you've got some poor person who's just started, it's their first job in check-in, and you're absolutely convinced that your luggage the size of Pantechnicon is actually hand baggage, how do you actually have that argument? And he introduced this tangible way of measuring. Does it fit in here? Yes, no. If yes, yes, you can take it on board. If no, put it in the hold. Luggage is the bane of people's lives. It pisses me off in spades when I see people struggling onto aircraft with 93 pieces of baggage, completely ignoring the basic rules that the airline have laid down. If the airlines are going to have a baggage rule, then let's enforce it, and enforce it strictly. Should we pay for baggage? Interesting question. If I am travelling business class or first class, no, absolutely not. It should all be included. If I'm travelling in economy, why should I actually pay extra for baggage I might not be travelling with? So it's perfectly reasonable to have baggage extras. I mean, I travelled with 30k of baggage the other day, and that cost me 130 quid extra. And I thought to myself, God, this is a lot. But ultimately, I was travelling with 30k of luggage. I think the airlines have got to enforce the rules that they set. And the problem that you have is if you've got a particularly aggressive passenger standing at the gate insisting that his baggage is right, and you've got some poor sod who's 22 years old, it ain't going to happen. They're not going to risk their reputations, their lives, their safety to have that argument. They're going to let it pass. Baggage is a big issue. I also think that people need to look at baggage again more holistically. Why don't we start looking at baggage pickups using couriers? Why don't we start looking at ways of getting the baggage from A to B? Most airlines will take a reasonable size handbag, which will keep you going for 2 or 3 days. So if you're going somewhere for 3 months or even a week or 2 weeks, Why don't they somehow arrange a way of picking up the baggage a day beforehand and delivering it to your hotel? It's that level of service that is going to start differentiating the airlines for the benefit. And I think that the first airline to come up with ways of doing things differently and better are going to make a killing.
Give us a bit of a plug for your own website and Twitter.
I sold the business 2.5 years ago. www.onscreenproductions.com and www.osphealthcare.com. Two businesses that we were in a very, very, very broad service arena that ranged from full-on marketing through to digital delivery, through to exhibition booths, through to events. It was the full range of stuff. You know when the time has come to move on, and you know when the time has come to go and start doing the things that you want to do. So I'm writing a novel at the moment that I hopefully will publish next year, which is all set in the world of celebrity. I do a lot of chairing of meetings, the odd facilitation of conferences, keynote speeches, and voiceovers using IPDTL. I'm not that busy, but by God, isn't it lovely being able to choose the jobs that you want to do and the ones that are actually going to give you satisfaction. And of course I have 2 holiday properties, as Neville has suggested, out in Fuerteventura, which you're more than welcome to look up. www.Villa Alegre, Villa Villa, new word alegre.co.uk, and www.rosadelaguna.com. That's the plug, and it's been a great joy speaking with Nev, and I hope that my disconnected witterings have given you some joy, some thought, or even if you have violently disagreed, I'll be delighted to hear from you. Richard at Cobourne.com, COBOURNE.com. Delighted to hear from you.
Oh, Nev, thank you very much, as always. Great segment. What a lovely chap again, as Richard said. That is Richard, sorry. As Nev said, it's such a lovely chap, and I know Nev was very much looking forward to it's a bit of a favourite of his, I think, that interview, actually. It's such a lovely chap.
But all Nev's stuff is awesome.
Well, of course, always is, always has been.
It's a shame Nev can't be here with us today.
It is a real shame. I think he'd really love it. Actually, while we're talking about lovely listeners, and obviously Nev,
we're going to have to say a massive thank you to certainly someone, one of our listeners at the Airshow.
Mr. Carl Lake has just wandered up randomly. I'm holding in my hand currently a pint of Sally B. Now, they've brewed, I'm not sure the name of the brewing company. We ought to find out,
we need to find out.
In fact, Google it quick, because you might be able to find out. But yes, they've brewed, this is a pint of Sally B. So it's what I call either a pale ale or a summer ale, depending on what you want to call it. And it's absolutely gorgeous. So it's a proper bitter, and there's been a range of beers that have been brewed here, especially for the Old Buckenham Airshow. So as I haven't got to go home for a very, very long time yet, cheers, everyone.
I know, cheers, everyone. Thanks, Carl. Thank you, Carl Lake. He's one of the our Norwich Airport contacts. So a big thanks to you, Carl, for that. And actually, Carl had a joy flight earlier, or a experience flight earlier, with his son. So I hope you enjoyed that, Carl, as well, absolutely. On the Saxon Air.
This is a rare thing for you guys if you're watching on YouTube. Matt is about to have
a
pint.
He's drinking ale.
What could possibly go wrong here?
I know. Just press the right buttons.
Absolutely.
So
can't promise anything.
What we're going to do, we're going to wrap up the show now, episode 175. But don't go anywhere, because we're not going to go and leave you all in limbo. We're going to stay live streaming online and with the air show. So keep up with us on there today. We're going to
as I say, we've got some great shots of some stuff coming up later. And here's a little teaser. This is the little helicopter. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see now that Carlos was talking about. Which is, are you saying it was a spray copter originally?
Well, yeah. These helicopters are used as kind of crop spraying helicopters. They're quite popular in the States.
Yeah.
And you can notice these because of their big bubble canopy in the front. So they good visibility on these helicopters, I will say.
Fantastic. Oh, Steph says in the chat room, by the way, thanks for keeping her entertained during the morning run.
Oh,
yeah,
Steph.
Doing that silly healthy thing.
Steph's probably just done about, what's she done? Oh, 11 miles.
What?
2 to go. 12 miles?
What's wrong with you, woman?
Dear, honestly. Oh, hello. Oh, Liz. Liz is in the
Yes, hello, Liz has just popped in the chat room as well. As I say, it's been a busy old show, but so that's what's coming up later. We've got all sorts of bits and pieces coming up. We're going to keep the stream going as we
Don't disappear, guys. Leave us plugged in.
But for those who are listening to the audio version of this show, episode 175 is now about to come to a close. So thanks very much to everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.